up on that.
John Ourand joins us. Sports Business Journal has a podcast now as well, and does great work, as we were mentioning earlier today in this hour. John, thank you for the time. Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina. I'm David Smoak. So the Big Ten, the media rights are out there, and this is unique because there are different people from different networks in the same room listening to various things they're saying. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, the Big Ten network owns all of those rights, and Fox Sports owns most of the Big Ten network. So the Big Ten gave up all the rights to the Big Ten network, and as a result, Fox actually has a deal done. So Fox is going to keep the Big Ten rights, and they are in the room as ESPN and NBC and CBS and Turner and Apple and Amazon all go. I mean, imagine, if you will, if you're a senior ESPN executive, you go into a room to talk about the vision of how you're going to conquer the world, and you're giving it to one of your biggest rivals and a top Fox Sports executive there. It's something that nobody has ever seen before. It's really, really a unique situation. But the bottom line is the Big Ten is sitting really pretty, and they're going to make a boatload from these rights.
So what's the domino effect for the Big 12? And, of course, the Pac-12 has their TV deal up much more soon than everybody else does. So what's the domino effect for all this when the Big Ten wraps it up with whoever it is their partner with Fox?
Well, the domino effect, it depends on how many packages the Big Ten ends up coming up with. Because you have all of these TV networks, all these media networks that are trying to get it. And whoever doesn't get the Big Ten is going to be disappointed. They're going to have a hole in their schedule that's going to be based on, trying to get big-time college football. And the likelihood is that the ones that are spurned are going to double down and try to get Pac-12 rights. And it's a little early to look to the Big 12. We don't know what it's going to be like without Texas and Oklahoma in there, and what those rights are going to look like. But the Big 12, they should be okay as well, because there are so many people just based on this one auction that are interested in college sports.
Is this just reflective, John, of how much live sports is in demand in terms of programming, whether you're streaming or just a regular network?
Yeah, you got it. It's right now, all of the broadcast networks is all about live sports and news, and that's why you're seeing so many awards shows on broadcast networks, so many sports, and there is a bubble so not everybody is going to be okay with this, but if the smaller to middle-sized leagues and conferences are really going to be hurt by this, because unless you bring in viewers and unless you can convince cable operators that you have the fan base to support it, the television networks aren't going to pay for it. But the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, big time college, they're all sitting pretty. I mean, the networks are falling over themselves to get those rights.
So as you said, a Fox deal is done with the Big Ten. That's going to be just a ridiculous number. And then there's all the rest of this that's being negotiated right now with Fox, being part of those negotiations, which, as you said, is interesting. How many of these networks could take a piece of that Big Ten pie? Is it simply a matter of, hey, one big offer, or could there be, 4 different channels that you can get the rest of this Big Ten action on?
It's not going to be 4, but it's likely going to be probably 2 more. Right now, it's split pretty evenly between ESPN and Fox. CBS really wants a package because they're going to lose the SEC. They have the SEC on Saturday afternoons in the 3:30 Eastern window, and that's going over to ESPN. So they need something to get with that. NBC, they have the Notre Dame schedule. They would love to get a Big Ten game to pair with Notre Dame and have a doubleheader, sort of from the middle of the country to go in there. ESPN definitely wants to keep it as well, and Turner's been kicking it. So you have 4 media companies that have TV presences, that have TV channels that are going after it. Probably, it'll go to either 1 or 2 of them, is what I suspect. And then the big rub is going to be what happens with Apple and Amazon. And will the Big Ten really try to hold hold out a couple more rights just to cede to those digital companies.
What's the best case scenario for conferences like the Pac-12 and Big Ten that the Big 12 that they keep it maybe tighter to just two or three, and then somebody who like CBS would be left out in the cold and then get aggressive?
Yeah, the best case scenario for the Pac-12 is if the Big Ten ends up saying, okay, we're just going to go with ESPN, and then you have also Rands, you have NBC, you have CBS, you have Turner, and those three then will turn and look and say, what's the next big college package coming up? It's going to be the Pac-12. And then you potentially could have a bidding war over that as well.
John, how much money, it seems like an unlimited amount, will Apple and Amazon bring to the table?
That's the big question, because it would seem like an unlimited amount, but so far it's been a pretty limited amount. All of the packages that Amazon and Apple have taken are packages that all the TV media companies have passed on. So Thursday Night Football, the NFL couldn't find a TV buyer for Thursday Night Football, so they ended up going to Amazon, and Amazon's going to have that exclusively starting this fall. Apple TV Plus, they just started up with a Major League Baseball on Friday night. That was a package that ESPN passed on. Fox had no interest in. They couldn't really find a TV partner for that, so that went to the digital streaming. The problem is that Apple and Amazon, they're for-profit companies. They're public companies, so they're not going to spend so much that they lose money on sports rights. ESPN, Fox, CBS, they all make so much money from cable operators that pay to carry those channels. They also make money from advertising. They have these dual revenue streams, and so they're able to afford these rising costs of sports so much more than something like Apple or Amazon, which they can sell advertising against it, but it's about sort of trying to gain subscribers. There's no middleman there, and it's a much tougher process for them to pay out for as much as ESPN has been.
You know that the reverberations of what happened when Texas and Oklahoma, that story broke in late July, and there were thoughts the Big 12 may not survive the summer, much less anything else, but they did. They stabilized. They brought in 4 completely different type of teams from different parts of the area. Some of them are not big, massive TV draws, but do you feel like the way they recovered, what Bob Bowlesby and company did, and of course he's leaving, gives them a chance to be much more of a player than people realize?
I think so. I'm adopting the same sort of attitude that I hear from the media companies, which is a wait and see attitude. Let's see what kind of TV ratings they get. Let's see what sort of fan support they get. It sometimes is difficult when you bring in new schools to have them assimilate into one cohesive conference. What's going to happen if potentially, and I haven't heard anything about this. This is pie in the sky. But what if the Big Ten decides that they want to expand, and they start looking elsewhere? So there's a lot that can happen in between now and when their rights are up. And right now they've made some moves to solidify where they are in terms of the rights fees they're going to get and to remain one of the Power Five. But a lot can happen between now and then. All the media companies are taking a look at it. I am as well. It's so hard to predict right now.
John, Ourand Sports Business Journal with the Sikkim 365 Radio.
How much are college football conferences waiting for Apple or Amazon to make their deal for the NFL Sunday Ticket, which has been rumored now that it might go over there, so that they'll know maybe how much money those companies would be willing to bid on them?
I don't know if they're waiting for that one to drop. That should happen within the next couple of months. Apple, Amazon are the sort of the two front runners in there. That's been sort of reported over the past couple of months. But they've been a part of every single rights deal that's come up. So the Big Ten rights that we started talking about, Apple and Amazon have come with teams of people to negotiate for those rights, to see what the Big Ten has on offer, and to see how they can use those. Major League Soccer, so sort of a mid-tier to high-tier league in the U.S. They've been negotiating pretty significantly with Apple and with Amazon about their rights that are on offer. So I think a lot. if I were a league or a conference and I have my rights coming up, I'm going to have been talking to Apple and Amazon, and those are really the only two that have been really overly engaged in terms of buying rights. Facebook took a look at them a couple of years ago and sort of pulled back. Twitter, the same thing. Google, YouTube, the same thing. But Apple and Amazon, they're starting to really, really get. What's a lesser word than aggressive? They're not quite been aggressive about it, but they've certainly been a part of all these. Feisty, I like that one. Yeah. They've been feisty about trying to get involved.
John, ESPN's obviously got the massive commitment to the SEC. That's going to be their bread and butter. But they've also, done stuff with the Big 12, Big 10, everybody. Where do they kind of fit in all of this with so many other challengers, so to speak, in the room negotiating as well?
The funny thing about ESPN, and this happened. A story I worked on probably about a decade ago. The ACC deal was up, and the ACC was rumored to be going to Fox at the time exclusively. And the ACC coaches, Coach K, Gary Williams, I think was still at Maryland at the time, and Roy Williams in North Carolina, they revolted. The idea of them trying to recruit when they don't have any games on ESPN and SportsCenter isn't carrying their highlights, and they just thought that would make their life a lot more difficult. We're more than a decade on from when that happened, and so basically the coaches blew up that deal and made sure that they did a deal with ESPN. We're more than a decade on from that. I still get the sense that the athletic directors and the coaches at the Big Ten, they want to stay on ESPN at some level. Like Fox has the main package, and that's not going to change. The Big Ten is sort of tied to Fox in a similar way that the SEC is tied to ESPN. But the coaches, they really want to make sure that they have a presence for their teams and for the conference on ESPN.
John, I don't know if this makes sense or not, but Bob Bowlesby sent a cease and desist to ESPN when there was rumors that they were teaming up even with Mike Aresco and the American Football Conference when they were at their most fragile point. Could that in any way, because that's gone. That's gone. The Big 12 stabilized, as we mentioned. Could that in any way affect ESPN and the Big 12 when, in fact, the new deal is negotiated?
The one thing I always tell people, I cover the business of sports, and I'm a business journalist. I've covered the business of media and the business of cable. The one thing that's unique about the sports business and the media business is that it's so relationship driven. Relationships really matter among these multi-billion-dollar corporations as they do the deals, and that's because the ESPN isn't just going to, or Fox isn't just going to do a one-off deal with the Big Ten. They're literally partners moving forward, and they're working together to craft schedules and to create productions. And if Bowlesby had still been there, I don't know, but I question whether or not he would have poisoned the well in terms of that relationship, and whether ESPN would just kind of say, like, no, we don't want to do it. At some point, you have to do business, but people are always surprised when I tell them, and I've been surprised to learn this too, at just how important relationships are, and that's a relationship that really blew up.
John, you mentioned a buzzword in college athletics these days when you mentioned expansion a few minutes ago. My question is, obviously you can't predict what all is going to happen, but how much do you think some bigger brands who maybe aren't locked in, kind of like Texas and Oklahoma, but, the Pac-12's got a deal coming up, but if you're USC, are you kind of eyeing what's going on in the Big Ten, or you're some of these other schools like that? Do you think that could have a ripple effect if the money is so vastly different? Or if, the Big Ten, for example, feels like, hey, we could go snatch a couple brands and we can, double this bad boy up.
Yeah, it's so funny. I hesitate answering this because I don't know anything about it. But I will tell you that, typically when there's been expansion and when you've seen schools leave, it's rarely a one-off. It's usually part of a trend. And so will Texas and Oklahoma be part of a trend? We'll see. I mean, I think that once this Big Ten deal comes down, you're going to have the SEC, you're going to have the Big Ten, the ACC is going to be a little bit further down, and you're going to kind of have everybody else. And so if you are a college in one of those other conferences, it's going to be harder to, like, you'll be looking. But at the same point, what would the Big Ten gain by expansion? Like, they already have the big deal. It's already locked in. So it's not like back when they needed Maryland and Rutgers, and they wanted to get into those TV markets for their network. Like, it's already fully distributed. So I can see both sides. I haven't heard anything, but it's something that, like you said, it's a buzzword, and everybody's keeping their eyes open for something to happen.
John, one question about the Pac-12. Their network doesn't seem to be – there's something missing there, and obviously Kliakoff is trying to change some things, and they have their own deal that they have to start working on as well. Is that network valuable? Is that something that they have to find something for it, or is that a concern for that conference?
That's the nicest way I've heard somebody describe the Pac-12 network.
I'm a nice guy.
You're good at that.
Yeah.
Apparently so. That's good. That's certainly going to be something that comes up in the negotiations going forward, and what happens not only with the network, but the network holds a lot of rights as well. And if you take a look at ESPN Plus, they have all the rights to. Look, I know it's not the Power Five, but they have all the rights to the Ivy League, and that's something that's valuable to ESPN. Like, if you want to see, a lacrosse game that Harvard playing, Dartmouth, like, you can see that on ESPN Plus. So those types of rights that are on the Pac-12 networks are considered valuable to ESPN. They'll bring in more subscribers. So I'm not ready to predict what's going to happen with the Pac-12. It hasn't been a success, certainly since it launched. And I know that a lot of media companies like ESPN are eyeing those rights. And if the Pac-12 wants to make a big deal and a good deal, it's going to have to play with some of those rights.
One thing you said, and we want to confirm this again, even when the Big 12 did change with all the Texas and Oklahoma stuff and expansion, live content, live programming, that's the big deal. They got to fill it somewhere. Networks have to fill that time, and college football can fill a lot of it. Is that correct?
Listen, you can't binge watch college football. You have to sit down and watch it when it comes on, which means you also have to sit through almost always the commercial breaks, which is how everybody pays for all this stuff. Live is what matters. And if you look at the Fox Broadcast Network, their whole primetime lineup is predicated on live programming, even down to the WWE on Friday nights over there. So, the networks prioritize it. They're paying for it. It just has to be good, premium live product.
Thank you, John. Appreciate what you do. John Ourand, Sports Business Journal. It's a great follow. He's a great follow on Twitter, John Ourand, on many things, college football, TV rights, and much more. We do have Craig's Off the Radar at 5. We're going to go around 5:15 or so with our guest, Matt Fortuna from theathletic.com, and some other college football news as well.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that was, I know we don't have a lot of, concrete answers. That's what we're all sort of searching for, but I hope that was interesting for everybody. I mean, it's interesting to me because it has such a big impact. And like I said a few moments ago, if this was just normal, negotiations, who cares? But this is a different college football now than it was the last time a lot of these contracts were coming up. And there is a massive gap that's about to become even more massive, and the fallout from that. And there's also new networks involved that weren't involved the last time a lot of these deals were being cut. I mean, what was Apple TV? It didn't exist. Amazon was still, in diapers basically. So, it's a whole new world for so many different reasons, and it'll be fascinating. I mean, we know the Big Ten is about to just have historic numbers. And then, the interesting part will be, okay, who else is involved outside of Fox? How do they split up the rest of that? What does that leave over? And, then the Pac-12's next, and then it'll be the Big 12, and then, everybody's kind of settled in after that for a while because the ACC doesn't come up towards 2036. The SEC will have this obviously massive deal, and the Big Ten's got their new one that they're doing right now, and then Pac-12 next, and then Big 12. And so everybody in the next couple years, 2 to 3 years, will have their new TV deals, and how different they all look will be the big question. 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 million compared to 30 or so million. There were thoughts that when Texas and Oklahoma, when that story popped in late July, that 35 or 40 million that they're getting now,
there were thoughts that they could get down in the teens. That's not going to happen. They're going to be okay, but all conferences are chasing the Big Ten and the SEC.
Okay to keep up what they're normally doing.
I think better than most people ever would have realized the week that story came down.
I think okay. I'm just saying okay.
Much better than okay.
Okay is a relative term in that
you're right.
They'll be okay, but there'll be two other people that are going to be damn dokey.
Yeah,
like they're going to be great.
You have these two mega deals. They're going to be that way. And now, can you be third? Can you be third or fourth? Can you somehow be high enough and profitable enough and get enough revenue to keep up with whatever is the mega college football going forward?
You know, the biggest thing for the Big 12, in my opinion, is it's not who they've added. It's they got to go win some damn national championships. I mean, that's what you got to go do. I think they've helped themselves in basketball. I think that's an attractive brand that, you know, broadcasters would obviously love to be a part of. And, you know, at one point in time, arguably the best football conference like 20 years ago. But that has not been the case for a while. They've been on a long drought of
2005.
16 years without a national title after having OU and Texas win a couple within a 5-year span. So, you know, the SEC, if they weren't winning national titles every year, wouldn't be the SEC.
No, they'd be good.
It's about winning like everything else. Ultimately, you win and people will watch.
97 Nebraska, 2000 Oklahoma, 2005 Texas, and that's it since 96. When we come back, we'll have Craig's Off the Radar.